I had just had our first child home from hospital, and we had a tin roof on our house, and there was this terrible rattling, and it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I had been asleep, being a new mother, and I jumped up and started to run outside, and I thought, then I went back and grabbed the baby, tried to get onto the bed, and I couldn't, so I ran. Instead of just going out the front door, I ran the full length of the house, which, I don't know, I think that's what you do. You don't really think. And it was dreadful because there were afterquakes, aftershocks, and I was too frightened to go back into the house. I just sat in the car with the baby outside. It was dreadful.
The sheep were restless, and I said to the boss, with Tony, "What's the matter with all the sheep?" And the weather was a bit rough. He said, "Oh, I don't know what's the matter with them, but they're restless and, bloody played up when you had them on the floor." I had about 100 and some odd lambs to shear that day. And next minute we copped it. And I was going up the neck of a sheep with the handpiece, and the bloody shed was shaking, and the handpiece was, everything was. And I said to Tony, "What the hell's going on?" And he said, "It's earthquake." I said, "No, you don't get earthquakes in bloody York." we had one, and he left the shed and came down to his house, and he came back up about 10 minutes after, and he said, "I could drive a truck through my lounge room wall. It cracked open that wide." And he said, "I rang York, and half the buildings in York have been wrecked."
And along came this almighty rumble, and I looked up, and of course I was up in the air, and the roof was going up and down like this, and somehow I decided I'm going to bugger this, so I jumped over the side of the shed. I jumped off the side of it, and the shed had these big rolling doors on it, and just as I stood up, the rolling door fell off and hit me in the head, and there's a bolt went through the top of my head here, and then when I woke up, I was lying on the ground, a lot of blood in my eyes and stuff, and the whole ground was just looking like the ocean. Just everything was going up and down like this. And I thought, it must have been the knock on the head that's done this to me. And I thought, who the hell can I tell this to? It was just like, and then when it stopped, everything was exactly like it was finished. Like the fences were fine. The rest of the buildings, had a bit of a crack in them here and there and whatever, but they all went all over the joint for a long time. And the ripple going through the paddock, I could see this ripple.
The earth was just like that. And the electric wires of, what run along, they was just like skipping ropes. The train line all buckled up, and the water pipe went like that.
The surrounding hills and paddocks were like the waves of an ocean. The ground was moving before our very eyes.
If you've got to whip up an egg in a jar and you tap it, it's got a funny sort of a hollow sound, and that's just what was coming from under the ground, under my feet. The ground was shaking under my feet, and I could hear this sound coming out of it.
And somebody yelled out, "Earthquake, everybody out." Well, you can imagine the door being 6 feet wide, and people were piling on top of one another and trying to get out. It was ridiculous.
You ran in and got under the bed, and I couldn't get her out. And how she got out into the passage, wasn't it? How she got out into the passage, I'll never know, but all of a sudden she was there. And I had a chook in the oven, one of those stoves, and it shook so much it shook the door open on the oven and sent the chicken out onto the oven door. And it done a lot of damage to different places because it cracked all the walls. And
We had a fridge then and it was just jumping around on the floor.
Did you realise it was an earthquake?
I did, but it took me a while, and I said, well, this is not a storm, I think it must be earthquake. Because then we had a telly and radio that we could hear about earthquakes elsewhere. So that gave us the idea that it was an earthquake. But I'd never want to go through that again. It's so frightening.
And about that time, which was perhaps 2 or 3 minutes after the initial noise, we realised that our youngest child, our son, who was a baby at the age of about less than about a year old,
yes.
We left him inside the house.
He was asleep in a, what you call a meat safe cot, and Rob went in and could hardly see for all the dust from the plaster had fallen off, and they had all plaster on the top of his cot, so he was very fortunate he was in a cot that was completely covered, otherwise he might have been squished.
The big cement tank was burst, spilling water everywhere. The overhead tank was burst. The wife had the job to get the car out of the garage because it had shaken it round sideways in the garage. That's about it, but we were very lucky because all around us, some of the houses got shaken down to the ground. You know.
Well, there was incredible damage. I mean, a whole hotel had to be pulled down.
And the Imperial Hotel had 40, I think it was 40 beds on the upstairs veranda that on the Saturday and Sunday nights, young farmers, young rural youth members slept on. And of course, at 10 o'clock or whenever it was the quake occurred, the verandas came down. So had that earthquake occurred sort of 10 hours, 11 hours earlier, an earthquake that caused no deaths may have caused a significant number of deaths.
I had my son Stephen, and I was making a cart for him, and we were at the back of the house on some concrete, and it started to vibrate, you see, and Stephen started to cry, and I picked him up, and I had to hang on to a post to stay on my feet. And our back lawn and ground, it was going like the waves in an ocean. And my first thought was, the septic tank with all the earthenware pipes will all be broken.
Our house was badly damaged and we never slept in it again. That was in October, wasn't it?
Yes.
And we didn't sleep inside our house again until it was completely repaired till probably February, March the following year, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was a long time.
That's a significant thing in my life, is that earthquake. Unbelievable.
The one that was close to here?
Yeah, 68.
Even though you weren't there?
I weren't there, I came back and I couldn't believe it.
So what did you see when you first got back?
Went to the fault line and the road was just like the road went like that, deviated like that and started again. You'll never see that, you'll probably never see that in your lifetime, but I did witness that.
If the same thing happened again now, we would have been out of the house much sooner than what we were then, because at the time we never heard of an earth tremor.
No, didn't know.
We did not know what effect it was going to have, and it was so loud.